Good evening. Welcome to October's Executive Scrutiny Board meeting. Do you have any apologies, Stephen?
Chair, yes, I have apologies from Councillor Eyre, Councillor Cooper, Councillor Patterson.
Okay, thank you very much. I have no late items. Any declarations of interest, members? If there are none, we'll move on to item 4, the minutes of the previous meeting. You've had copies attached, and I'm sure you've read them. You've also, I'm sure, read item 5, the forward plan, and item 6, Council Cabinet responses to scrutiny recommendations. Yes. Thank you, Lucy. Thank you.
Can I start with the minutes and ask on the minutes, we talked about Alice Street Hall report. Do we know which committee it's going to go to?
Stephen, over to you, please.
Thanks, Chair. I'm having a meeting with Alex later this week, so I'll report back to you all.
Thank you very much, Stephen.
With him.
Sorry, so we don't know yet?
Not yet, no. I'll be having a discussion this week.
Okay, thank you. Can I go
Lucy,
on to,
yep.
May I go on to the forward plan?
Sorry, yeah, we're moving on to the forward plan now. Do you want to talk to that?
Yeah, do we need to approve the minutes?
Sorry?
Do we want to approve the minutes?
For the forward plan?
No, do we want to approve our minutes from last time?
Yes, I will do.
We probably need to
you're racing ahead, Lucy. This is unusual for you.
Okay, sorry.
So just bear with me.
Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
The forward plan includes the long-term waste project, I think it's called a project for the council, and I think this is a really important decision for the city. We know that how our waste, people are interested in what happens to their waste, and I think that we should therefore particularly take an interest in what the council is doing along that. So whether we as the exec scrutiny would like to have a report on that, I would be very happy to have a report coming here. But equally, it might be something that could go to one of the other scrutiny boards.
If I can come in, I think it ought to really go to Hardew's committee. Hardew not to come in. I think that's the right and proper place, Lucy. Certainly initially. Hardew, over to you.
Yeah, I mean, that's correct, Chair. The waste strategy is being prepared, and that will be coming to the community's scrutiny review board. So that's in hand, and I think the officers are working towards a waste strategy for Derby City Council.
Thank you, Councillor Dinser. I think we've rectified that. Anything more on the forward plan? If not, we'll move on to Council Cabinet responses to scrutiny recommendations. That's also attached. And then item 7, Performance Plan 21-22. Okay, if there's no comments on that one, we'll move on to item 8. Oh, sorry, Lucy. I'm racing ahead now because you set the pace.
I thought, Chair, we might.
You want to talk to the? What do you want to talk to the?
I'm talking to the performance plan.
Performance plan. Go on then.
I thought, Chair, we might be getting an officer introduction to the performance plan, but if we're not, I was just going to say that in terms of the COVID updates that we're expecting, I think in November. Is it November? I'm hoping that can consider the impact that long COVID might be having on adult social care and the numbers of people applying, coming forward, hoping for adult social care. There may also be younger people as well who are being impacted on that, but I'm hoping that can be something that we include in that report. Yeah,
I think also I'm going to bring Alison in because I think she is already looking into this or about. Alison, over to you.
Yes,
can you put your microphone on, please, Alison? Sorry. Because it's difficult to hear.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Kerr. I mean, at our Adults and Health Scrutiny Board meeting in June, we asked, that specific question was asked about the impact of cases of long COVID on our healthcare and social care systems. And at that point, it was seen as, whilst it's a recognised problem, it wasn't deemed to be having any particular impact on those systems. However, we do have a report coming to the Adults and Health Scrutiny Board at our meeting in the new year, and I can't remember the date of that, forgive me, but which will be on ME and those related, long COVID, CFS, those issues and those sorts of questions will be raised then as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Right, okay. Stephen, could you speak with regard to the performance plan, please?
Yep, thank you, Chair. It was just to briefly explain that the item that we're going to receive that's been moved over to next month, that was basically due to unforeseen circumstances, so you would usually have an officer present to talk on this item. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that clarification, Stephen. Right, moving on to the Council Cabinet proper. Item 8, this is the Derby Bus Service Improvement Plan. If I can ask Mr. Bryan, I think it's Werner, isn't it?
It's me to start,
thank you.
Chair. Thank you. This document is part of the Bus Back Better, so the National Bus Strategy, which was published in March, and Cabinet approved the creation of an enhanced partnership and the development of a Bus Improvement Service Plan, the BSIP, in June this year. Now, Government requires us to submit and publish the BSIP on our website by the 31st of October. The main thrust of the national strategy, if you recall, is to grow bus patronage and support the industry post-COVID. Now, the guidance for the BSIP came out several months after the strategy, which meant we've had some tight timescales to prepare our plan, and hence the report that you see here is very much a draft, and we're seeking the delegated approval to complete it before that 31st of October deadline. The Department for Transport have provided capacity funding for local authorities. They allocated an amount across the piece to support the development of the BSIP and the enhanced partnership, and we have had a second tranche of funding allocated, which again is indicated in the report. So these documents, these BSIPs, will underpin the enhanced partnerships, and those enhanced partnerships have to be in place by April 2022, and they will oversee the implementation of the BSIPs. They're intended to be living documents, so we'll be refreshing them annually. We've commissioned consultants to help us develop the plan, and they've engaged with our operators, of course, with local councillors and with passenger representatives. And we're aware that the timescales of the BSIP haven't perhaps allowed for the level of consultation we would want, but the enhanced partnerships will do this and give us the time to do that, and therefore the intelligence and the information we pick up from there will further enhance our BSIP as we go along. As I said, it's an organic document. Now, we have good working relationships in Derby. We've had a strategic bus partnership for a number of years now, so that gives us a really strong foundation for which to develop our enhanced partnership. We, of course, have been working with our neighbouring authorities. This is a requirement across the piece, particularly Derbyshire County Council. Obviously, they're the other local transport authority. And at this stage, you'll see in the report that we've developed a voluntary memorandum of understanding, which really formalises our joint working so that the services that, of course, go across our administrative boundaries, we can ensure that passenger experience is consistent. As I've said, the timescales are short for us to do this, but I think that's recognised nationally. So the first round of BSIPs is very much expected to measure on shared principles, getting those baselines right, understanding where our services are now, and assessing where that further analysis will be needed. So the document, the draft document you'll see in front of you, has two main focuses. So to really strengthen our understanding and develop that evidence base that we need to make decisions along the way, but also build on the improvement plans we already have, more particularly the Transforming Cities Fund that you'll be aware of, and really accelerate and expand those so they can have a much greater impact. There are also targets contained in the BSIP, and Government expect journey times, reliability, passenger growth and customer satisfaction to be there as standard across the board. We will also, of course, want to develop our own local targets, and we'll do that as we go along. The key thing about the BSIP is that it is a partnership document. It has to be agreed with our bus operators before we can submit. Delivery, as I said, focuses on what we're doing already and how can we accelerate those things. So looking at some of the priority corridors that we've already identified through the Transforming Cities Fund, looking at key pinch points, tackling congestion and introducing some innovation around demand responsive transport and being able to run that with the revenue funding that is the most difficult thing to get. A passenger charter is also a crucial part of a BSIP, so that's something else we'll be developing. And the reporting, we have to have annual reports, but we would also obviously report that 6 month, and those will be publicly available. So very much this is meeting the requirements of our national, the national strategy, but also to give us time to work right up to the wire to deliver the BSIP by the 31st of October. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. I'll take some comments shortly. What I'm concerned about is the incredibly short timescale that we've got to get an application in. By my reckoning, it's 26 days from today. And as I mentioned in pre-agenda, I and other councillors are concerned about a number of communities throughout this city are already lacking a bus service to meet their basic day-to-day requirements. And although it's my own ward, I did cite the problem with Darley Village with the loss of the 17A, and many elderly, infirm and those without a car struggle to get to their GP, their dentist and town. And I think that this apart from having grand plans, and this is no criticism at all of local officers, but we need to have something practical to address these real needs. So I'd like to make a recommendation, but I will take comments first before I put that recommendation to the actual committee. But it is along the lines and addressing the concerns that I actually have. Would anybody else like to come in at this stage? Lucy, thank you.
Thank you. I was very pleased that this the draft document does say draft all over it, because it does clearly need quite a lot of more work doing to it. And some of its errors in things like street names and inconsistencies like the proportion of Euro 6 compliant buses. And it's also the emissions. So there's no talk, for example, about electric bus charging requirements for the bus station, which I'd expect to be there, and whether we've talked to Western Power Distribution on that yet. But I'm also concerned that back in June, when this last came to ourselves and onto Cabinet, we put forward a recommendation which Cabinet accepted, that there should be consultation starting immediately with passengers and others. And we haven't had that. And I don't personally think it's good enough to say that we haven't got enough time to do this. It doesn't have to be a full public consultation. You can do light touch public consultation that is still public consultation, even if it was only putting things out on Twitter or whatever that people could respond back to. So I'm really disappointed that none of that has happened. I'm also concerned that while we're talking about greater mobility for everyone, we actually know that one of the ways that we can become more sustainable is actually for people to be travelling less. So we shouldn't be actually seeking greater mobility for everyone. Greater sustainable mobility, yes, but not a blanket statement, which is in paragraph 2.3 to say the aim is greater mobility for everyone. It's also talking quite extensively here about 4 corridors. That includes London Road and the A52 through Spondon, Uttoxeter Road and Mansfield Road. Well, when were those 4 corridors last reviewed as the most important? Because where we are having the growth is not just on London Road, it's down on the A514 in Chellaston, it's on Burton Road with Heatherton and Highfields Farm, and it's on Stenson Road, where we link through to the Infinity Park estate. So, and then we have key groups like the university and Rolls-Royce, and we are not talking about their corridors. So before we launch into saying that these are the 4 corridors we need to look at, I think we need to review why they are the most important. And this is partly because we don't just need to get back on the bus buses the people who were on the buses. We actually need to grow our patronage, as the introduction said. We need to be consulting and engaging with people who are not yet bus users. Otherwise, we won't get that increase in patronage that we are seeking. So maybe we've got some answers to some of those, but I will also, Chair, put forward a recommendation if the answers aren't good enough.
Okay. Right. Well, I will just put my recommendation that hopefully you can support, and that is to urgently identify those communities in Derby negatively affected by a lack of a local bus service and to formulate plans to address this deficit. An example being Darley Village, where many elderly, ill and those without a car now struggle to get to their GP, the local shops in town, following the withdrawal recently of the 17A Darley bus service. So that's my recommendation. Do you have a seconder for that? Thank you, Hardiel. And yeah, Alison as well. Would anybody want to speak to that? Are you quite happy with that to go forward? I'm getting nods from around the room. Are people happy with that? Is that okay? Anybody dissent from that? Lucy?
I would just appreciate having the officers comment on that first to make sure, because you had a pre-meeting with the officers. I haven't had the benefit of that. So I just appreciate to have their comments before we vote on it.
We certainly will, but I welcome those, but I don't want to put them in an invidious position. And at the end of the day, we are elected members and we'll take their views on board. But any comments on that, Nigel or Werner?
I think the recommendation's fine, but sorry, I was going to say the recommendation in itself is fine. It's how we embrace it in the current document, because the identification of those communities and how that's addressed in partnership with, don't forget, there's still commercial bus companies, is something that the enhanced partnership is designed to deal with rather than the actual BSIP. So I think we could represent something in the document that says this is something that will be a key part of the work for the enhanced partnership, but it's not for now to nominate and those communities as such. That needs to come out of the next stage of work, which is the enhanced partnership is a statutory platform with full consultation.
Thank you for that, Nigel. I do understand. I mean, this is why I think the importance is for this committee to raise it with Cabinet, then for Cabinet to debate it and ask officer advice about taking it forward. That will happen tomorrow night. I think initially, I'd like, if we, and I'm getting some noise, to let's get it before the Cabinet to discuss and then take officer advice about taking it forward. Anybody objects to that? I think we're in favour of that then. Thank you very much. Do you want a copy of that? Can you read my, if you can read my scribble. If you can't, just give us a shout. Okay. Right. If that's all on that one, moving on to item 9. Sorry, Lucy. Yep.
I'm waiting for some officer comment back on the range of points
sorry,
that I raised.
Lucy. You deserve... Can I have some positive comment back for Lucy, please? Nigel or Werner? Yeah. Nigel, thank you. Sorry, Lucy.
Let's start with the corridor review and the corridor identification. A lot of that work is based on the commercial intelligence from the bus operators and what are their primary corridors. So, again, this crosses over with your recommendation to some degree that at the stage that we're at the moment, some of that will not address the community service concerns. They're looking at it from a very commercial viewpoint, historically from a commercial viewpoint. So I absolutely accept there is a need to review those corridors as we look at growth in jobs or growth in housing. And I think that's one thing that the current voluntary partnership doesn't stimulate, but it's one of the few things that I think is really meaningful about enhanced partnerships, is that is an ongoing activity, and the intelligence base needs to be much richer than it has been in the past. And leading on from those corridor discussions, that's where we can then talk about how communities adjacent to those corridors may then be served in the future. I absolutely take the point on consultation. I think there is a timing issue that we do need to just highlight to all councillors, is that government changed the release date for the guidance and the publication of National Bus Strategy, but didn't change the end date for delivery. So we would, along with all other local authorities, have had something in October 2020 with a deadline for October 2021 for submission. What we actually ended up with was something in March, April and May 2021 for submission still in October 2021. I am aware that some local authorities have done exactly some of that light touch consultation. I'm also aware that they've not done a great deal with the actual feedback at this stage, because most of the feedback is things that belong to the work of the Enhanced Partnership, because they are about community concerns, they are about route and specific buses, and that's not what the BSIP is about at this stage. This is very much a springboard document to allow, it's a starting springboard document to allow the Enhanced Partnership to begin work with a creative agenda. But I think those issues and the consultation type elements, they absolutely do need to be part of how the Enhanced Partnership is formed. And I think we need to find a reporting process for the Enhanced Partnership as well, so that there's oversight in terms of how that partnership is actually working. Is it working creatively? Because it's not just the operators and the council officers. It needs to have some business representation, ideally. It definitely needs to have passenger group representation and some specific groups within that around accessibility. So it's quite a wide parameter for the EP and how it needs to be constituted. Just coming to the point about EV buses, it is something that I think is missing from the document. It is something that we need to put in there, because although at the moment none of our operators are in a commercial position to necessarily jump for ultra clean buses because of their particular commercial dynamics in the COVID environment, it is something that over the life of this BSIP or over the next 3 to 5 years that we need to be shouting and telling government that this is something that we will want, because of course the operators won't be able to buy a diesel bus in a few years' time. So we need to get some preparation groundwork for that. And even if we don't get immediate funding for it, it is something we need to start pitching for right now.
Thank you very much, Nigel. I mean, I think you have the sympathy of hopefully all councillors here, but the impossible deadline that you've been given. It reminds me of the impossible deadline that you're given with regard to the post-COVID travel plans and Darley, where that stirred up a hornet's nest because you weren't able to consult as widely as I know you would have liked, and you got accused of all sorts of conspiratorial things which weren't within your grasp. So you do have the sympathy of this committee with the impossible task. And I do wish government would allow you more well, all authorities, but ours particularly, more time to do these things properly and in a reasoned way, and consult as widely as possible. Thank you, Mr. Bryan. Lucy.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for those answers, Nigel. I do still have a recommendation, Chair, that I'd like to offer the committee. It comes in separate bits, so people can reject part of it if they don't want all of it. So I've started by saying exec scrutiny, you can expand that, executive scrutiny board, is disappointed that there hasn't been any meaningful consultation with the public or bus passengers, even though this was a recommendation from June supported by Cabinet. We therefore recommend to Cabinet, 1, that future consultation seeks to engage with people who are not yet bus passengers, as well as those who are, and 2, to consider the needs for enhancing routes along all corridors, not just those preferred by operators.
I'd be happy to second that as well, Lucy. I think it echoes what I said at the beginning, really. It's an impossible position I think we've been put into to do this properly. But yeah, are members generally sympathetic to that? Does anybody object to that? Alan.
Can you just read out your recommendation again?
Yep. Yeah. If you can read my recommendation again, I'd be grateful. Thank you. Oh, sorry, your recommendation, of course. But me back.
Executive scrutiny is disappointed that there hasn't been any meaningful consultation with the public or bus passengers, even though this was a recommendation from June supported by Cabinet. We therefore recommend to Cabinet that future consultation seeks to engage with people who are not yet bus passengers, as well as those who are, and to consider the needs for enhancing routes along all corridors, not just those preferred by operators.
Alan, over to you.
Thank you very much indeed. I'll agree with that.
Okay, I think we have agreement on that from all members for it to be put forward to debate. Are you okay with that, Stephen? Thank you very much. Okay, if there's nothing else on this particular item, moving on to item 9, supporting the delivery of the Eastern Gateway project. Who's taking us through that? Is that Rachel or?
I'll take you through
Sorry?
that report. I'll take you through that report, Chair.
Thank you very much.
Catherine
Thank you.
Williams. Thanks. So the report being brought to Cabinet relates to the Eastern Gateway project, which is a partnership initiative with the owners of the Derby Centre. The proposals for the project is to transform this key gateway to the city centre opposite the bus station and on the junction of East Street and the Mallage. The project itself is one of 3 projects within our Future High Street Fund programme that successfully received an allocation of just over £15 million earlier this year. And the report focuses on the Eastern Gateway project, summarising the rationale, the project delivery arrangements and the approvals required to progress the project. I'll be relatively light touch in this particular report because there's a further report in the confidential section which details in more depth the actual grant terms and conditions that we're proposing. But in summary, the delivery arrangements for this project are that the owners of Derby Centre will lead on the design and construction activities. They will incur project costs and then claim a grant back from the council, fully funded by the Future High Street Fund under a grant agreement. And the grant funding will support the public realm and public infrastructure works associated within the project to ensure we comply with subsidy control regulations. The benefits of the project are extensive, unlocking £6 million of private sector investment, creating a number of new jobs and improving public space. And the governance for this project will comprise of PMO board approval prior to entering into the grant agreement once the detailed terms have been negotiated. And the management of our grant agreement will then be managed under a steering group with both parties represented. The programme milestones are outlined in the report, which evidence the project can be delivered within the Future High Street Fund timeframe of March 2024. Detailed risks are outlined in the confidential paper, as are the financial implications in respect of this proposal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that. Lucy.
Thank you, Chair. And I really want to just at this point comment on the climate implications because this is being sold as a really positive element from the point of view of climate. Now, the points given here are probably most to do with climate mitigation in that more open space is going to be good for, and potential sustainable drainage systems is going to be good for dealing with high temperatures or high precipitation events. But if we're spending £12 million on what is predominantly built infrastructure, demolition and built infrastructure, there will be significant other implications in terms of the carbon footprint of development. And I haven't got a very good picture from this report as to what the development is actually going to be, apart from a bit more open space and a few trees. So I am just mindful that if we are going to be serious about moving to a zero carbon city, we need to know how much carbon we are spending in a rush to spend it before we hit the buffers. And is this really the best way of spending it? I don't know whether officers will have a comment on that, but it may come back to we need to do more training of officers to think in the fullest way about the climate implications that they are commenting in the reports. Thank you.
Okay, would you like to come back on Lucy's comments?
I'll just make one comment in terms of the scheme itself, Councillor Kerr, and you're right, there is very little detail in the report currently on the basis that following the Future High Street Fund award, Derby and owners are now working up the design with a view to submitting a planning application in November. So this project was actually referenced at a communities review panel a few weeks ago where similar questions and challenges were asked about the detail of the scheme itself, and we made a commitment at that scrutiny panel to share further details of the actual design of the works and what they'll comprise, at which point Councillor Kerr would probably be more another opportunity to pick up your comments and look at those in a bit more detail once we have the design a little more progressed.
Yeah, I can remember in our pre-meeting when we discussed this, and I did say there, the real elephant in the room is the decline of the high street shopping, with online and out-of-town shopping being more popular. And the real barriers are ones beyond our control, and that's of the high levels generally of rates and rents and the cost of parking. And the real need in this city, as in most cities, for niche shopping throughout. And unless these are addressed, it's a bit like being on the Titanic and rearranging the deck chairs. We have to rearrange those deck chairs, but I don't think it will solve the real problems that face us. Rachel, you'd like to come in to rearrange those deck chairs? Thank you.
Yeah, I just think it's a really important point just to stress that clearly, the council has a role in facilitating the change that we're seeing in our high streets, the change in our retail sector, changes in behaviours in terms of we'll come into cities for working and living, all of those things. And we are developing a number of projects that are on the go already that, coordinated together, are trying to reinvent our city to be a different sort of place, actually is able to be exciting and vibrant and a place we want to be in rather than just about retail. And one of those things is about reshaping some of that space. And unfortunately, I think it's a good point that Councillor Kerr makes about repurposing buildings. Some of that is going to require potentially demolishing some parts of some buildings to enable that remodelling, and that has going to have a climate change impact. But we are facing an existential crisis in our high streets and our town centres, and we need to play our part, I think, at creating an environment to try and reimagine them and reshape them in the best possible way for our citizens. But it's a complicated picture, absolutely, as you've said.
Yeah, it is incredibly complex. And again, I'm not being sycophantic, and I think officers do a great but almost impossible task in trying to rearrange those deck chairs. Because I don't believe, and I'm not just getting at this government because it's one that I don't particularly support. I'll criticise any government that doesn't take it seriously, because I see this decline not only in Derby but elsewhere in the country. And it's so sad to see the dereliction of our cities. And I think this needs to be of national importance and priority. And unless it's given that, almost with a government minister or a czar, a bit like when Michael Heseltine was put in charge of issues such as Liverpool, when that was struggling in the 1970s and 1980s, we are going to struggle. I do admire the valiant efforts of officers, but I really would like Cabinet to be writing to their colleagues nationally and hopefully join with the local government association to make sure that this is put up that agenda. I know there's a million and one things at the moment post-COVID. I accept that, but I think we need to beat that drum to make sure that this is up there as well. Thank you. Alison.
Thank you. Yeah, just to comment on the general conversation, really. I mean, I think it's a balance of factors, isn't it? I mean, I can't envisage what this scheme looks like. So I have had a quick look at it, and I think it could be okay. So, but in principle, I think we have to look at, yes, any kind of construction work has a carbon impact, which we have to try and mitigate or limit. On the other hand, we have to think about, if we're really quite serious about travelling less and relying more on our local communities and areas, it's even more important that our city centre and our district centres are regenerated for the local community, because we'd actually hope that they will be spending more time there. We might anticipate seeing the decline of the out-of-town shopping centre. So, I mean, personally, and in principle, I would support this scheme because I do think we need to regenerate the city centre, and also as an attractive space to be, not just as a retail space. I mean, if you look at what Nottingham are doing around the old Broadmarsh centre, they're not building any more shops there. They're doing a green space. We have a lot of green spaces in Derby, but I'm just saying that it's a balance of factors. And overall, I think we should welcome the regeneration of our city centre, whilst also, as Councillor Repton says, calling for more radical measures from the government, such as as recently has been suggested, reducing or even eliminating business rates, so that concrete businesses, niche local businesses, have a chance of surviving against the online giant. So personally, overall, I think there are reservations about the national direction of travel, but overall I welcome this report, but I do hope it's part of some integrated regeneration programme for the city centre that includes a sort of radical approach to how it becomes an attractive place for people to be and not just shop. Thank you.
To make a recommendation, I'm just drafting it now. Executive Scrutiny calls on Cabinet to write to Government asking for a named Cabinet member being given specific responsibility for the revival of our high streets, helping local government fulfill what is currently a very challenging problem facing every city in this country. That is offered in a positive way, non-party political way. It's an issue, it's the elephant in the room. Hopefully members can support that. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Hardiel. Is anybody, I don't think it's party political. Is there anybody, Alan, first of all?
Well, thank you, Chair. If it's not party political, then I think that should be form part of the recommendation. Those words should go into the recommendation.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
I'm happy to incorporate that, Alan. Yeah, in a non-party political way. It would be executive scrutiny calls on Cabinet in a non-party political manner. Okay? Yeah, Alan? You okay with that? Manner, etc. Okay. Lucy?
It's wonderful having one's laptop here because you can Google. There is already a Parliamentary Under-Secretary of State, Minister for the Northern Powerhouse and Local Growth, whose responsibilities include local growth policy and initiatives, which includes specifically high streets. So I think the answer...
With all due respect, I don't want to be demeaning, but we don't want the office boy dealing with it. We want a senior government minister.
Right.
You know, it seems to... I mean, and I don't want to be disparaging, although I am being, I know that, but it needs to be given prominence. And with all due respect, it needs somebody of the stature of Michael Gove, dare I say. And, you know, because that's what all we've got at the moment, but at least, you know, he might get something done. You know, it hurts me to say that, but again, in this non-party political way, that's what I'm saying. So that's a recommendation. It's been seconded. Are you generally in favour? Okay, thank you very much. Have you captured that? Sorry, Alan.
So that's okay, Chair.
Sorry, Alan.
I support this scheme and I welcome the report, but I'll abstain from your...
Okay.
Okay. Cheers.
I understand, Alan. Thank you. Senior cabinet member given specific responsibility for the rival high street, helping local government fulfil what is currently a very challenging problem facing every city in this country. Thank you. Right, thank you very much for that. If there's nothing more on that item, we move on to item 10. He said playing for time. Transforming Cities Update Mobility Hub. Who's going to take us through that? Vanna?
I'll start. One strand of our Transforming Cities approved programme was to develop mobility hubs / park and ride. And one of those hubs was identified on the A52 corridor. And we're now at a point in our development where we're ready to take forward the decision towards land acquisition. So the funding has already been approved through our development of a strategic outline business case, and that was co-produced with the Department for Transport. So they are expecting land purchase and remediation to take place as part of our development of the mobility hubs. We've been allocated over 9 million to develop those hubs, and while we refer to park and ride, we mean much more than the traditional park and ride as we all know them. This is very much supporting the long-term adoption of sustainable travel patterns, and particularly in key employment sites, which was the underpinning development of the Transforming Cities programme. So the concept will include options for sustainable ride modes, including enhanced cycling and walking route improvements. It will also align to those complementary bus prioritisation measures we were talking about earlier that as part of the BSIP. And all those things are being developed and delivered alongside our TCF programme. And there is clearly, as part of this development, picking up your comments about green, this will be green. There are green refuelling options on this site as well. So potentially very exciting. There is contamination, as we referred to in the report. We've carried out due diligence, as you would expect us to, and from our information, we have an independent assessment of what will be required. And again, remediation is expected as part of that strategic outline business case, and the funding will come through the TCF. So approval will basically give us the authorisation to move forward with the development and design of this important site as part of our mobility programme.
Thank you, Werner. Lucy? How did I anticipate? Mystic Martin. Right, thank you. Thank you.
Yes, Chair, there were a couple of things I wanted to mention here. One is to ask whether this site is going to be suitable for our high-speed bus connection between us and Nottingham to drop in, so that people can be commuting in both directions from this, not just into the city centre, but also off to Nottingham, to save the number of journeys along the A52. And the second question was a bigger question about the Transforming Cities project altogether, which has quite a large element which relates to improving connections between East Midlands Airport and both ourselves and Nottingham. Now, we know that the number of flights taking place at the moment is a lot lower. One of the things that we haven't had publicity about is actually this is a really good thing for climate change. And there has also been discussion about how we can be moderating the number of flights that are being taken by people, because we know this is a significant contributor to climate change. And I just wondered, given that the Transforming Cities project has been around for, 5-8 years now? It's quite old. Whether we've actually reviewed it to see whether it's actually still appropriate to be spending so much money on improving connections to an airport, when in the bigger picture we should be reducing the number of flights being taking off there.
Thank you. Okay. Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you, Nigel.
So yeah, I have a kind of related point actually, so it might be worth me asking that before Nigel replies. Simply to say that I don't have obviously the latest statistics, but my understanding is that the connection between Derby and East Midlands Airport, the bus connection, is already extremely good. It's extremely frequent, fast and reliable service. That's my appreciation. So thank you. So I suppose I'd add that to what Councillor Kerr has said and ask for a response, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alison, for that. Nigel.
Okay, on the ability of the Nottingham-Derby bus link to utilise the new site, absolutely yes, that's one of the key strategic things in its favour. The airport connection is, in terms of transforming cities, is less about getting people to the airport to fly, it's more about connections to employment. So it's not just employment at the airport, it's obviously all of the subsidiary logistics that's set up around what is the second largest freight airport in the UK and a key employment growth zone. You're absolutely right, Councillor Martin, in terms of the bus connection to the airport is good. What we were trying to do is to make it better, both between us and Nottingham and us reaching out into Leicestershire as well, just trying to improve it. It feels like a service that's been relatively successful, so we're trying to enhance that. And again, that's very popular with people who work on those areas as well. And we wanted to make sure that the service truly reflected the nature of the employment there. They're 24-hour operations, so we wanted the service to have good frequency over a longer period of time. And the other thing about the connections to the airport in the Transformative Cities bit is that a lot of them are about strategic cycle routes as well. So the strategic route that links Derby to Nottingham also links Derby and to Nottingham and the interland, if you like, in between, to the airport for more sustainable travel on higher quality routes.
Thank you very much for that, Nigel. Alison.
Would you bear with me just to press that point a bit, Councillor Epton? Is it okay if I just pursue that a little bit with, sorry for...
Please do.
Yeah, sorry, I'm not being obtuse here, Nigel. I'd just like a bit more information. I mean, you know, I actually originate from Castle Donington, so my understanding about this bus service has got absolutely nothing to do with going to the airport into travel, and everything to do with just exactly the kind of issues you're talking about. And I know that there are increasing numbers of warehouses and depots in the area and in Castle Donington itself. So I just... Again, I just wonder, in terms of, are you saying that you're trying to, improving that as a bus service to get to work, etc., involves making it, you said it means 24 hours, and at the moment it's not 24 hours, it's just, so, I mean, that seems fair enough to me. But in terms of, as Councillor Kerr was saying, I mean, that in itself seems fair enough. But if it's a really strong focus, I would say that, you know, if there's more to it than that, I would ask whether really you need to give so much resource and focus to that on an already good service when we have so many other areas that need attention. I'm asking, in essence, thinking as I'm talking, is it really, you know, justified to give it such a level of focus that it has? Thanks.
Thank you, Alison. Nigel.
Yeah, it does reflect the essence of transforming cities, which is about improving the links between centres of population and centres of employment and learning. So as a key employment and a key employment growth site, that's why it justifies sitting in the bid and sitting in the approved package. And just to also a little bit of history, don't forget that the package of measures in Transforming Cities was co-produced with the DFT, so we had a very strong steer about where we should be putting our resources in terms of linking employment and growth.
Thank you, Nigel. Okay. Right, okay, if there's no more contributions on that, moving on to item 11, the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund, authorisation to bid for Wave 1 funding. Any contribution, any comments at all? Sorry?
Are we having an introduction to this?
Yeah,
I can do an introduction, Chair.
Sorry, I was looking to Lucy. I thought she would dive in before you, but she hasn't. Sorry, over to you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks.
So the government, through BEIS, have introduced the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund. It's a funding stream that's on a tight timescale. We have to get the bids in by the 15th of October. This report is seeking Cabinet's authority to enable us to bid. If we are successful, the expenditure of that bid will be led by Derby Homes rather than the council, and the funding will have to be spent between 2022 and 2023. The details of the bid is outlined in paragraph 7.2, but essentially it amounts to a bid of £946,000. That requires match funding of £634,000. That match funding is from the housing revenue account. It's already contained within budgets that were going to deliver energy efficiency measures for our council homes in any case. We've also been working with Metropolitan Thames Valley Housing, Chair. They are undertaking, if their bid is successful, to improve a further 80 properties in the city. And we're also asking members to give us authority to submit our bid along with Metropolitan through the Midlands Energy Hub. And that's because the Midland Energy Hub is actually funded through BAYS, so they've clearly got a very strong relationship. And if our bid is part of a sub-regional bid with a number of local authorities all bidding together, it's obviously going to be far stronger than if we put a bid in isolation. The works, Chair, will be for energy efficiency measures, as I said, targeting particularly our Thorncliffe properties. They're the cast iron panel properties that we have in the city, and they're some of the most poorly performing council stock that we have, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Really positive, quite exciting proposals in this, and certainly moving in the right direction. Thank you, Ian. Lucy, and then Hardiel.
Thank you, Chair. It's really good news that we are already working with at least one other housing provider in terms of looking at their housing stock in the city, because although Derby Homes is our largest social housing provider, there are a number of others. And Derby Homes has already done a better job of upgrading its housing stock in general than most other social housing providers. So I was wondering, are we working with all social housing providers, or is Metropolitan Thames actually the only other one we're working with?
Ian?
They're conversations that are starting to take place, Chair. Metropolitan Thames Valley are probably the most important to get involved in this programme, because many members will recall they were previously Hallmark and then Walbrook in their previous guises, and they will have some of the very worst housing association stock in the city. So it's great that they're coming on board, Chair. But we will be then contacting other RSLs. We're having those discussions to see what their plans are. And obviously, if appropriate, we'll be strongly encouraging them to bid for later phases of this funding. The government are already flagging this is just phase one, and there's going to be more phases available, Chair.
Thank you, Ian. Hardiel.
Thank you, Chair. As you said, I think this is really welcome and good news that 80 council properties will benefit from this significant energy cost saving. Obviously, this is not going to complete the job. It's probably going to make a small dent in the numbers. That's my assumption. I don't know if the officers can tell me at the moment what is our journey in terms of how many properties could potentially benefit from this sort of funding, welcome as it is, and whether that's something they can share with me now or subsequently, because I'd like to know what the scale of the task is. As I say, this is welcome, but I suspect it's a long way to go, and how do we actually make sure all the other properties get the similar opportunities to save carbon emissions and improved installation of security in terms of fuel consumption.
Great question, Councillor Dinser. Ian, can you respond, please? Thank you.
I probably only got part of the answer to that, Chair, to be honest. I believe that this bid, if successful, will pretty much sort out all of the council properties that have an EPC rating of E or lower. We will then still have a number of properties that are still on with an EPC level of D, and I don't know offhand what that number is, Chair, but obviously I'm happy to get that and pass to yourselves, Chair.
Thank you very much, Ian. Thank you. Alison.
Thank you. Slightly, related to this report, but a sort of broader question, I suppose, is I'm thinking, obviously, because of the right to buy, so many properties have been sold off, which was, as it was, not the responsibility of Derby Homes. And I'm thinking of a street in my own ward, Handyside Street, where there's some properties with external insulation on them that actually, even I find very attractive. But obviously you can see which houses belong to Derby Homes and which houses don't, because the neighbouring ones don't have them. Now, I know this is the reality of purchasing your own property. These are private houses, and perhaps the government, first of all, I suppose, do you know if the government's coming up with schemes to help insulate private houses? But the reason I'm asking this in this context, that's a broad question, I know, but is I'm thinking about these houses like the ones you're referring to, which are particularly poorly constructed and insulated now, and people have purchased them. Now, obviously, that isn't really Derby Homes' responsibility, I know, but I'm just thinking outside the box and thinking, could there be a time where, because Derby Homes has got the knowledge, it's got the initiative, it's got the capacity, it can employ the right people to do a good job, could we actually see a time when Derby Homes might be in a position, or might try and get into a position where it offers to ex-council house tenants the opportunity of, obviously they would have to pay something, but something towards it, insulating their homes rather than just leaving all of those people to the pure market system? Thanks.
Yeah, I think it's a great question that Alison raises, because there are offers about insulating your loft, etc., and yet there doesn't seem to be anything, as far as I'm aware, to deal with properties such as this. I think that's a great example that Alison gives of Handyside Street in our ward, where you can see the ones that are not Derby Homes, because they're the ones that are left out in the cold, literally and metaphorically. So can you offer those people any help? Or is this, again, something we need to be asking Cabinet to take up with government? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. We have successfully bid for 2 lots of government funding, what's called LAD 1B and LAD 2, and combined they amount to about £2 million worth of funding, a little bit over that. And that funding is targeted at private homeowners. And indeed, we are looking to submit a third bid, which would also help private homeowners, but also landlords of rented properties as well. The one caveat I would put on that is that we are struggling to deliver those schemes because we are chasing the same workforce as the rest of the Midlands are chasing. So there's just a finite capacity in the workforce to deliver these works, and ourselves, along with all the other local authorities, some housing associations, as we've heard earlier, are all chasing these same workforce, and there's a real capacity problem at the moment. And one other issue that is arising out of that is there is price inflation. We'll have all read about that in the news, that building prices are going up, and the original bids, the government, where they set the original cap of £10,000, that was envisaged that would cover the costs for each property, and now we're getting prices of £12,000 and £14,000 per property, and that obviously creates a funding gap. So there's difficulties to be overcome, but we have been successful in attracting some grant funding to help people in that situation. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah. Do you think this is a call that we need to make on Cabinet to, like, lorry drivers and chicken pluckers and turkey pluckers, to ask for a temporary visa for EU workers to come over to help us insulate these homes? Would that be a way forward? Because you are saying we have a capacity. Is that anything to do with coming out of the EU, or is it just we just haven't got them, or why can't we train them up? Why can't we train people up here? Sorry to put you on the spot, but I will do anyway.
That could be the case, Chair. It's probably not for me to say. What I can say is there is a lack of that workforce at the moment. Now, how, as a sector, we can get more people into that particular sector is perhaps a bit beyond my remit, Chair. But certainly, we will be talking to Derby Homes as to whether it's an area they want to begin to skill their workforce in, and that would certainly then enable in the fullness of time for them to start offering those services to private homeowners. But I think we're a long way from that, Chair, given the shortage of the workforce at the moment.
Thank you. I think, Rachel, you wanted to come in? Or?
It's probably an unfair question to ask officers to answer this.
Sorry, Rachel.
I think it's an unfair question to ask officers to comment on, really, the
Oh, I don't know. I think
it's
Rachel, it's called democracy. I think, you know, it's, you know, I mean, you could, you see, you could retort to me. I'll give you, yes, Minister. You could say, you can think that, Councillor Repton, but I couldn't possibly comment.
I could say that.
I mean, I tell you what, I'll give you the scripts, so you bounce them back. You bounce them to me, and I'll return them. All right. Thank you very much. Okay. Lucy.
Chair, in the light of our discussion, I have a recommendation. We welcome that the Council is already connecting with other social housing providers to help identify housing stock in need of energy improvement, and recommend to Cabinet that we continue this work. And also that the Council engages with the Derby College and elements in the building trade to improve sector skill levels for doing this work and availability of relevant materials.
I'll be happy to second that, Lucy. Is anybody object to that recommendation? Have any concerns? I think it's a way to move it forward. I'm getting general nods in that direction that they're okay. I'll just let Stephen, are you okay to capture that, Stephen? Thank you very much for that. Okay, if there's no more comments on that, we will move on to the compliance and contract and financial procedure rules. Is that going to be you, Simon?
It is, thank you, Chair.
Okay, we've been building up to this for you. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
And thank you for the building up. This is again the standard report at each of the cabinets. There's 3 items on the agenda tonight. The first is in respect of the South Derby Growth Zone, or the acronym SDGZ, and Infinity Garden Village. Members will be aware that... do you want me to stop while you answer your phone, Chair? Should I carry on, Chair? Yes, sir. And I think members will remember that this is an important site, not only as a new garden village, but also in respect of the link to the A50 junction and Link Road. The government provided an opportunity for highways authorities to submit a levelling up bid up to £50 million back in June, and we, along with Derbyshire County Council and the partners identified in the report, supported that bid going in. As part of that, it was acknowledged that a lot of the highways bids would be less developed than some of the other levelling up bids, which were focused about regeneration, culture, and one other aspect, which I've just temporarily forgotten, and that we would have to build up a fuller business case if we were to be successful in the levelling up fund. The partners identified in the report and in the financial implications have agreed that we need to invest approximately $349,000 up to the end of November to get a business case, which then allows us to either move forward the levelling up fund bid if successful, or could be used as a business case for future submissions. You'll see in the report that the proposal is that the County Council, the City Council and the private partners all contribute just shy of £100,000, and that we also got some capacity building money to top that up to $350,000. We can offset our $99,000 by some capacity building money that the government gave us for levelling up, which takes our net contribution down to £37,500, and the report seeks the Cabinet's approval for contributing that from a delivering differently reserve. The second item on this report is Project Assemble, which is in respect of a site currently occupied by the vacant Assembly Room building. And this is recognised as an important site for the future of the long-term Derby City Centre plan and the master plan and the cultural heart of the city. As part of the securing planning consent to demolish the Assembly Rooms complex, work has progressed to develop a vision for site that is sensitive and sustainable and ensures that it contributes positively to the wider transformation of the city centre. The report talks about the development of options as part of this cultural heart of the city plan, and also indicates that we have been in discussion with Derby University and Derby Theatre about the potential and exciting opportunity maybe for relocating from their existing home and making a step change in the sort of offer that they can give, both educationally, commercially, and also being one of the leading arts councils, learning theatres in the country. To do that, there is a requirement that we are able to get it to the next stage where we can use the business case, being informed, having various options, appraisals and details as part of that. So the report details in paragraph 7.3, or 7.4, sorry, that the feasibility costs that we need to progress. One is about property advice about the various options to make sure that we consider issues such as the option of appraisal viability assessment, to further build on the design development proposals, and also to sort of create the business plans which allow us to be in a position to use this as a evidence for either further public sector support and or private sector investment in the redevelopment of that site. The costs here are going to be offset again by some of this levelling up capacity funding that I mentioned in respect of the South Derby growth zone, so a balance of that, and also a capital feasibility pot, which represents a contribution from the University of Derby into this exciting prospect. So the revenue budget requirement is 142,000 to take it to the outline business case stage, which will then inform external funding bids required to bring the project vision to life. So this is an important part of moving that very important site in the city centre forward. And the final item on here is in respect of, if I can just find it, sorry, just going up, DfE Children's Home Capital Bid. And this is about to apply for match capital funding to create additional provision in children's homes for children and young people in this area. The council has, as you know, got a series of children's homes, a series of other proposals to bring provision within the city, which is important for us both in terms of the placements for children and also the financial cost of limiting out of city placements. So Derby City Council is proposing to be party to a joint bid between 0.9 and 1.2 million, with some or all of the local authorities currently part of the D2, N2. So that's a Derbyshire County, Derbyshire City, Nottingham City and Nottinghamshire County Council. And so the recommendations, Chair, are as stated in 2.1, 2.2, 2.3. Happy to take any questions.
Before I bring Alison in and one or two others, I've got a couple of comments to make. We all want the assembly rooms sorting out, the whole city do, and it's tantalising some of the things that have been hinted at and referred to in this document. But there was one reader of the Derby Evening Telegraph a few days ago to the story about the assembly rooms when they put that this is a costly PR kite flying, nothing more, nothing less. As I say, we all want it sorted out and we want the best fit possible for the future. But we have the Cabinet asking for £124,500 for consultants' fees to look at options appraisal and then an outline business case. And the current administration, this is the current administration, there's a very poor record of delivery regarding this very costly and botched failed attempts to refurbish the existing assembly rooms against all expert and officer advice. So why can the public have confidence of them spending £124,000 of scarce public money on consultants and that will take us forward within the next few years? Any need to spend £124,500 on consultants I can tell you what they'll say. They'll say, yeah, we need the university on board to fund it because you haven't got it, the local authority. I also suspect, and I don't need 124,000 to be able to advise Cabinet this, that the university will probably say, we haven't got the money, or all the money. And I know, and you don't need £124,500 to say this. I think they'll say, we need the majority coming from the government. So we perhaps could save ourselves a lot of time and a lot of money by cutting out the expensive middleman. And I think we need to have a time scale put to this, and I'll come to that in my recommendations. But before I do, there'll be members who want to take. Councillor Martin, first of all, then I'll come back to you, Simon. Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Councillor Repton. I do welcome the proposal of the capital spend on the children's home, the bid, anyway, the capital bid, because I think that is extremely important for the city, especially at the moment. But going back to the other fund, I actually thought it was, can you just clarify before I continue? I heard, was it 142,500 or 124?
The net investment is 142,500
right.
after contributions.
Thank you. So basically what we're being asked to comment on tonight is another £180,000 in total on consultancy fees. Now, it does now, we become sceptical really, particularly as we're look at the budget overspend that we're currently facing with the council. And people like myself, and I know there will be plenty of others in this room, have previously been cabinet members and sat at the budget rounds, scrabbling around for 25,000 for an athletics club track in the city, and yet here we are spending, what is actually at 180,000 on consultants. So, of course, this has to be right, and the knowledge has to be right. But actually, in 2014, when I was the cabinet member for leisure and culture, I knew that the theatre wanted to go in with the university, who do subsidise the theatre, in order to create a different theatre and bigger theatre. And so I looked at this opportunity then by visiting the university, talking to the then Vice-Chancellor and talking to the theatre. And at that time, as it happens, the university Vice-Chancellor was not particularly interested, which is fine. I mean, it's interesting that they've changed their position, and that could be very positive, and we could very much welcome a joint venture of this kind for the city. But I can only stress in the most extreme terms that, so many of these options have been looked at. Back in 2014, there were already so many consultancy reports in relation to the assembly rooms that officers were reluctant to give me them all because the volume of them was so high. People have been reporting on the potential for the assembly rooms and the assembly room sites for, well over a decade, and right back then it was always a recommendation that the best place for a new performance venue, if we were to have one, was the assembly room site. So my point is that I feel quite strongly that unless there is some commitment from the university to the kind of capital input they could put to this project, this is a severe waste of council taxpayers' money. And I don't say that because I don't wish the current council cabinet member well, or even this administration. We all want the best for this city. I say that enough is enough. We know that already millions have been spent on botched attempts to redevelop the assembly rooms and the assembly room site. I think this is quite a serious matter that we're being asked to potentially give our approval to another 142,500 for that project. So given that, unless Simon can reassure me right now that we do have undertakings from the university as to sort of that they are likely to be able to input appropriate levels of capital to this, or another, we have some sense of a commitment from government that they might put in significant levels of capital into this city, as they did in Manchester back in 2014. George Osborne gave 70 million for a new theatre there. Unless we have if we have undertakings like that, fair enough. But if not, I am going to put a recommendation in to oppose this expenditure in the strongest terms. Thank you. So I'd like to know from Simon whether we have any of those been given those undertakings. Thank you.
Take Hardiel first of all, and then if is that okay, Simon? Then I'll come back, because there may be other questions. You can answer them all in one go. Councillor Dinser, thank you.
Thank you very much. I mean, I think I have to applaud the ambition of the university and the City Council and anybody else who wants to further improve the City of Derby. And I'm all with that. But I have to be sympathetic to Councillor Alison Martin's comments, because she mentioned her role when she was a cabinet member for leisure and culture. Or going back even further than that, I remember when I was a cabinet member for leisure and culture, when we spent a lot of time trying to see how we could work with the theatre and performing arts, and a lot of consultation was done, a lot of ambition was in place, but the reality was it couldn't stack up without the funds. And really, the report in the Telegraph seemed to give false hope that this was going to happen. It was portrayed as if something's going to be delivered. We know from this report, in the idea of a options appraisal, with the preferred option being the Derby Theatre moving to the Assembly Room site, but also looking at other options at the same time. What is it going to tell us? It's going to tell us that, yes, it would be a great achievement to have a performing arts replace the defunct and unusable assembly rooms, with many options, it's had in the past, with options appraisals, which then have come to nothing. It will tell us that without the funding, either from, as Councillor Martin said, either from the university, the City Council, or, most importantly, government, or some rich benefactor maybe, without that confirmation, the chances of the options appraisal getting anywhere, apart from telling us that the funding, if the funding is available, you can deliver. Why waste so much money on something that we have had discussions and options about in the past, and it comes down to funding? Without the funding, nothing's going to fly. So I do have sympathies with Councillor Martin's comments, and I am in line with those.
Thank you, Councillor Dinser. Simon.
Maybe just to start some of a response on here. I'll draw your attention to paragraph 4.11. In April 2021, the Council's Planning Committee approved an application to demolish the Assembly Room complex. Planning consent is subject to a development agreement being in place to ensure certainty over implementation of a future use of site. So the Council, through its planning function, and also having declared that building surplus and needing to be demolished, has agreed that. So in order that as a council we can move that site forward with whatever option is for the site, we have to carry out that proper option appraisal to get to a development agreement which gives certainty over the future use of that site. The options here, both in terms of the options detailed in 6.1, which talks about, 6.3, 6.4, 6.5, talks about do nothing, do minimum, 100% commercial redevelopment of the site. So in order to establish the most optimum use of that strategic site in the city, we have to seek property advice, and that's the first bit: land use, option appraisal, viability assessment, soft market testing, outline procurement advice, so we can see what is a viable solution for that site. As the report quite says, that as part of the cultural heart of the city, and Rachel might want to add to that, we do believe that a cultural offer around the marketplace is the optimum use for that, but it may not be the only use. It could also be used for commercial, residential, hotels, or whatever the other options are. And we want to understand what they are and the viability of each of those options. And the university has, through discussions, come forward saying that they welcome the opportunity to consider whether a learning theatre, which is currently what they have in the Derby Centre, can come on to the marketplace as part of a cultural offer and expand the offer that they have. As with all of this, we recognise that the viability requires either public sector funding in order to bring this forward. That could be future levelling up funds, it could be contributions from the council, university, or it requires a mixed scheme where we're going to bring in some commercial income. Because we've got to meet that planning obligation, we need to go one step down the line to get that certainty about effectively what is the next step to that. This cost package that I detailed, which is in paragraph 7.4, sets that out, I think, quite clearly of what we feel is required to get more certainty on this journey to fulfil the planning condition, obviously, but also the fact that the council has decided it will demolish the assembly rooms and redevelop that site. So I think hopefully in my answer I've given the context of why this has to be investment we need to incur in order to get to the stage where we have a business case that we can form an evidence-based decision on, because otherwise we can't rely on surveys from 2014, 2008, because this is going to be a demolished site and new provision in the context of 2021, 22, or whenever this happens. Thank you, Chair.
I'll just read out my recommendation, which I think reflects some of the comments, then I'll bring you in, Lucy. Executive scrutiny seeks Cabinet reassurance that the options appraisal process is concluded within a 12-month period. Cabinet is also asked that within this 12-month period, it will provide the public with a fully costed, fully funded, comprehensive business plan demonstrating that the £142,500 consultants' fees were good value for money and a multi-million-pound scheme is the best we can achieve for the city. Lucy.
Just in terms of the costing, looking at the table on paragraph 7.4, it would seem to me that it actually isn't 142,500, it's actually 240,000, but some of the funding is already identified. I may be corrected on that.
It's the net figure, as I said earlier.
Yeah, so it is, the total cost is going to be the 240. But Chair, I wanted to highlight that Planning Committee did not say this building ought to be demolished, and there is not actually planning approval to demolish that building yet. The planning approval has not gone through, even if we had a wonderful design and the funding for it stacked up. It is still to be confirmed. I checked the website today. It is still pending. We're waiting for an answer from the Secretary of State. So this could be completely futile money being spent down the drain because we may not get the approval to do the demolition. It is a building that has been thought highly of by the 20th Century Society and as a significant brutalist architecture, whether we love it or not. It has its style. But as well as that, there is a much stronger movement in architecture today, which is suggesting that buildings should be repurposed rather than demolished. And this is partly because of the climate implications of demolishing something of this size and probably building something of a similar size structure if it's going to be a performance venue. And that is, again, taking away part of our carbon capital before we become a zero carbon city. And the implications for climate are not reflected in this report in any way on that. So I would think we ought to be a lot more imaginative on the way we deal with this. In terms of the building, I think we should be exploring whether it's an opportunity to put a trust together, which might include the university and Derby Theatre, ourselves and other bodies, and spin it out at arm's length in the same way as we did with Derby Museums. And that might be a way of retaining an interest in the building, but also not being liable for what happens next to it. And I think that hasn't been explored. It's something we should explore. I haven't put a recommendation together for that view, but it may be something that other people might like to comment on. But what I am suggesting is that we ought to highlight to Cabinet that at the moment we don't have the approval for demolition, and that therefore we should be looking, amongst the options, we should be looking at the reuse of the existing building. And it may be that Derby Theatre can look at it differently to the way the council looked at it. So I also have a recommendation which I'm happily put forward. I also have one about, I've also want to say something about the children's homes, and I can look at that separately when we've finished talking about the assembly rooms.
Thank you very much. I try and be short on this because obviously, like many other people, I feel reasonably informed and feel quite strongly about it. I very much agree with some of the points that Councillor Kerr has raised, and I respect your answer, Simon, but I think your logic is you're finding a reason to, you have to have, we know that because it's in a conservation area and etc., you have to have a reason, you have to have a use for that building, a use for that site before you can obtain planning permission to demolish the assembly room. So this looks like a desperate scramble to find a potential use for that site. And the points that we have made is that, and I feel this very strongly, and that unless there is some prior indication that you can find some commitment to capital investment, either from the university or another suitable funding body, then you won't have that potential use. You can speculate it, and it would be terribly irresponsible to demolish that building on the basis is that there was a really positive idea that there might be a new theatre there, but there's no plan to be able to actually build it. With respect to, I'm not particularly committed either way to either saving the currently assembly rooms or demolishing it. I do think that what Councillor Kerr, given all the information I looked at before, which is actually not that long ago, then it's very likely that the current assembly rooms building is not going to be able to provide a financially viable theatre space because it doesn't have a fly tower, etc. And those things have not changed in all the time it's been standing there. So I also have a recommendation which is a bit similar to yours, Councillor Repton. I would say it's rather stronger. So we can, and I'd welcome hearing Councillor Kerr's recommendation as well. We could discuss which one to go for if we go all for them. So should I give you my recommendation now, and then we can decide what to do, reject it, or? So I would say that executive scrutiny notes that millions have already been spent on failed attempts to deliver the assembly rooms and the assembly room site. With respect to the current proposal, executive scrutiny recommends that further council taxpayers' money is not spent on this scheme until a commitment to capital investment has been obtained from either the university or other suitable outside bodies. Thank you.
If it's acceptable to you, I think we can incorporate that in mine, Alison, in terms of that, Stephen, we could add, if Councillor Martin's agreeable to it, that at the end of my recommendation that no money is spent on consultants' fees until a fully costed and funded scheme is established. Would that be acceptable to you?
Well, I suppose I think Simon and the Cabinet are like, just quite that wording, are likely to come to say that you, unless you have the consultant's view on this, you won't be able to do a fully costed scheme. So could I suggest that we change that to sort of a little bit more what I said, Martin, which is that a commitment to a capital investment has been obtained from the university or other suitable outside bodies. So rather than a fully fledged scheme, which I acknowledge you can't get until you've got, but we need an indication from somewhere that there might be some capital. I think that's reasonable. Thanks.
Councillor Martin, can you just repeat that, please?
Just that last bit about the...
Thank you.
About no money being spent. Additionally, no money will be spent...
Okay, what I said was Executive Scrutiny recommends that further council taxpayers' money isn't spent on this scheme until a commitment to capital spend has been... capital investment, if you like, capital investment has been obtained from the university or from other suitable sources.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, yeah.
If I can tag that on to mine. Okay. You're right with us, thank you. Okay. Lucy, can I invite you, please, too? Do you want to deal with these schools one first of all? Or do you want to do it the other way around?
Let's hear what I want to say about the assembly rooms first.
Go on then.
Okay, I was going to suggest that we say to remind Cabinet that approval for demolition of the assembly rooms has not yet been given, and ask that options for use of the site includes consideration of the reuse of the existing assembly rooms. Reuse might build on the design work that was done around 2005 to improve the entrance area and increased functionality of the performance space, which I believe included the fly tire, not putting that bit in. This might also be achievable in time for and enhance our bid to be City of Culture in 2025.
I think the problem is, Lucy, I mean, I'm desperately trying to be helpful and supportive, but I share similar concerns to Councillor Martin. I'm not sure, sadly, because we've been through this. We've spent a fortune on consultants' fees who just said, it's not doable. There isn't a business case to make that viable. The building is in such a bad state as well. It isn't a good use. We've been down that track before, and I think we could be criticised, or the Cabinet could be criticised, saying, well, you've been down there. You spent a fortune, you spent years, you're just going back in that loop again. That's why I don't know if I can support it, Lucy, with my hand on my heart. Alan?
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to actually second Councillor. I will second that proposal. Thank you. Sorry about the name slip.
Yeah. Over to you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I support what Lucy states there. I know it's late in the hour, but I've actually worked on that building, the assembly rooms, right back from the 1980s. I understand the electrical systems there, and it could be brought back into use electrically without spending the vast sums that some of these consultants are quoting. And I know that's a fact from my own experience. I spoke to the engineers that were on there that worked on that plant room before the fire and after the fire. I know one of them quite well who used to work for me. And I'm saying that building could be brought back into use, and why would you demolish that at the carbon costs and so on? Surely that's got to be explored again. Thank you.
I'm a Democrat. I'll go with what the majority want, but I had to be honest and just raise my own reservation, because otherwise I'd be hypocritical if I didn't. I'll take, because I know Alison wants to...
Sorry.
Alison, is it okay if I come back to you a second? Because Hardy hasn't spoken. Then Hardy, you come in, and then Alison. Thank you. Hardy.
I respect Councillor Evans' expertise in this matter, because he's professionally works in certain aspects of buildings and how they can be resurrected. But I think, Councillor, I've not been down this route. The Council has, the Cabinet has, and I think as Councillor Repton said, to start opening that Pandora's box might be a step too far. So I do respect what you are saying, and you, if you were given the chance, you might be able to do better on the building and sort of deliver on it. But unfortunately, the work that's been done and the assessments and the expertise that has been used has mitigated against that, despite, I think, very strong aspirations by the Cabinet, the ruling Cabinet, that they wanted to deliver on that, and they had to sadly step back from that because the costs were going too far. So we can pass it, but I think we'll be going backwards into reopening a situation which has been, I think, closed by the best attempts by the current administration, and the best advice from the previous administration that a rebuild is the most appropriate option.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dinser. Councillor Martin, Councillor Prosser, then Councillor Grimdale.
Thank you, and thank you to the committee for bearing with me with my many interventions on this particular issue. It is really important, we all know that. What I would say is that I could support, I mean, you might get support for your recommendation anyway, Lucy, so that's fine, but I couldn't support it in its current form because we absolutely know that it's not viable as a theatre and performance venue as such, in you know, the form that we might want it to be for the city. The current administration spent millions of pounds trying to do that and had to stop it. So it's not only been a kind of consultant's opinion, they ignored consultants' opinions, went ahead and then had to abandon the attempt. So we must not spend any more millions of pounds trying to make it a commercially viable venue in that way. However, if your recommendation said that you would like to find some other use for the assembly rooms, I mean, whether that might be, I have, you know, a conference centre, for example, then, you know, I wouldn't say it automatically has to be demolished or that we have to go down that route. So, you know, if you were to offer an amended recommendation along those lines, Councillor Kerr, I would support that, but I can't vote for something that involves looking at something that which we have been proven can't work. Thank you.
Councillor Martin, it's Councillor Prosser, please, and then Councillor Grimmer.
Yeah, I think Councillor Kerr's main point seems to be that we don't actually have the authority to demolish it at the moment. And we may not actually have that authority because certain people might overrule us. And therefore spending money at the moment, until we know that we could demolish it even if we wanted to, would probably be a waste of money, or might turn out to be a waste of money, regardless of whether we think we can afford or we have a plan to repurpose the building. That's sort of irrelevant if we're unable to demolish it. I don't know if that kind of makes any sense, but I just wanted to point that out. I don't know. I've looked at and worked with all sorts of buildings. I haven't read the report. I understand there are issues with the roof that may be resolvable one way or another, or may not. But until we can demolish it, it would be pointless to spend a fortune working out what we might do with the empty space afterwards.
Thank you, Councillor Prosser. That's a positive contribution, because what I'm going to suggest, just before I take Alan in, if you could be thinking about it, Lucy, if you would consider, when you'd probably get myself, maybe Councillor Martin and Councillor Dinser on board, is if you said if authority is not given to demolish, other viable possible uses for the assembly rooms ought to be looked at, then I think we could do this in a united way and take it forward. If not, I think we'll have probably some division. But something just to think about. Have a think about it, Lucy, and then it's up to you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll throw my hat into the ring, and as a former Cabinet Member for Leisure and Culture, I'd go back to Derby University because before they got involved, the theatre was in the dark, as we all know. It was out of order. You know, we went to Nottingham, we went to Leicester, and it was Derby University that saved the theatre in the city. And it was John Coyne, who was the Vice-Chancellor of Derby University at the time. So I'm quite excited that Derby University are hinting or making noises that they want to be involved with that site. And I fully support that. And I thought that what Simon said, again, I fully support everything that he's said about this. We need the finance to actually make this go forward. And at the moment, we haven't got approval for demolition, and we wait until a decision, until demolition is agreed. So I wouldn't, I've seconded Councillor Kerr's recommendation, and I would like it to be really along that, with those words. I don't really want to see a great change from Councillor Kerr's recommendation. My thoughts, thank you.
Right. Has anybody else indicated the wish to come in? Lucy, yes. Lucy.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. What I had previously read out didn't say that the assembly rooms needed to be reused as a performance venue. So my first sentence had said to remind Cabinet that approval for demolition of the assembly rooms has not yet been given, and ask that options for use of the site includes consideration of the reuse of the existing assembly rooms. So that which was a substantive part of that, didn't include as a theatre. It then went on to say reuse might include looking at the work done in 2005. So if I say reuse might be for an alternative purposes, or even build on design work that was done around 2005 to improve the entrance area, would that satisfy?
Well, I think if you want to take the whole room with you, and it's up to you, Lucy, I think we'd want your final sentence just omitted, because I think it's implicit in that anyway, because you've talked about uses. I think it makes it too prescriptive, I think, for at least 3 or 4 of us. So if you could just leave that last sentence off, Lucy.
Well, I've said reuse might be for alternative purposes, but I think we also...
Yeah, if you could just leave it at that, yeah.
Yeah, but I think, Chair...
You don't need to give examples, though, do you?
But I think that people need to be reminded that the issue of the fly tower was actually delivered and solved in 2005-ish, when there was a report done at that time. And I don't think we have lots of past cabinet members, but we don't have the right one for that time.
Well, it's up to you what you put forward, Lucy, but I think I'm trying to be helpful in terms of taking the whole of the committee with you. If you just leave that last sentence off, I think you've got the whole room behind you, and you don't lose anything
Chair,
from your recommendation.
I'm going to hope that we have the whole room, maybe except for yourself, behind me, by saying
I don't think you've got
reuse
it.
might be for alternative purposes,
I won't bank on
or
it.
even build on design work that was done around 2005 to improve the entrance area and increase functionality of the performance space. And this might also be achievable in time for and enhance our bid to be City of Culture in 2025. I'm also wanting to put together some words to talk about the other financial and management structures for the assembly rooms. I haven't finished writing that bit.
Right, well, I'm not going to spend too much longer on this, Lucy, because we've spent a long time already, but if you can do that fairly quickly. Alan, if you can do some ad-libbing while Lucy pens
Chair,
away.
I think Councillor Kerr has probably got the majority of the committee with her on that recommendation. Not the majority of the committee, but possibly not the majority, but most of the committee.
You're acting as Chief Whip, are you?
I don't mind, whatever you
I don't
wish.
think you're right, with all due respect, Councillor Grimmadale. I'll see you outside and talk to you. Okay, right. That was a joke, by the way. Okay, as you know. Right, not a very good one, but there we go. It's that time of night. What I'll do, first of all, I'll put mine and Alison's recommendation first. Can you put that one forward, and then we'll come back to yours when you've finally done that. I'll give you a bit more time, Lucy. So can you read our recommendation out first, and hopefully we'll get that one through, and then hopefully we'll get some agreement on Lucy's as she composes it. Stephen.
Okay, Chair. Executive Scrutiny seek Cabinet reassurance that the options appraisal process is completed within a 12-month period. Cabinet is also asked that within this 12-month period, it will provide the public with a fully costed, fully funded, comprehensive business plan demonstrating that the £142,500 consultancy fees were good value for money, and a multi-million scheme is the best we can achieve for the city. And also, this is now Councillor Martin's addition at the end, and also resolved to recommend to Council Cabinet that no further taxpayers' money is spent until commitment for capital investment has been obtained from the university or from other suitable sources.
Okay. Are people generally supportive of that?
I think the cost is 240. I think the cost is 240,000.
242,500, I think, isn't it? 240,000, is it?
And I just have amended what Stephen sent to me just to say, I think it is important to say no further taxpayers' money is spent on this particular scheme.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's what I wanted to qualify.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lucy, for altering that. Yes, it's important if we can get those figures correct. I took it the bare one, but I think it's important to say the true figure. Are we generally supportive of that? Can those indicate who are in favour, please? Those against? The motion is passed. Thank you for that. Lucy, do you want to come back with yours, please?
Right. Mine says to remind Cabinet that approval for demolition of the assembly rooms has not yet been given, and ask that options for use of the site, includes consideration of the reuse of the existing assembly rooms. Reuse might be for alternative purposes or even build on design work that was done around 2005 to improve the entrance area and increase functionality of the performance space. This might also be achievable in time for and enhance our bid to be City of Culture in 2025.
Okay, so it's just that final paragraph on that. So I personally might not be able to vote for it, but I won't vote against it because the 90% I agree with. But anybody else want to comment before we go to the vote? No, okay, move to the vote. Those in favour of Lucy's recommendation, please show. Those against, please show. None. So that's passed. Okay, I think that's an honourable way to deal with it. Okay, thank you very much for that. Thank you. Lucy, you've got one on schools, I think.
No, I was going to say I've got another one which is quite exploratory, but what I mentioned earlier, to ask Cabinet to explore if other financial and management structures for the museums.
Okay, do you have a seconder for that? Alan seconded it. Does anybody want to comment on it at all? Or shall we just go to the vote? Sorry?
To ask Cabinet to explore if other financial and management structures for the assembly rooms might be a more effective way forward, such as a trust, as for Derby museums.
Look, I know that you're all over there. You're just fed up of hearing my voice on this, aren't you? I know you are.
I won't put that to the vote.
The problem I have with that, Lucy, and I'm just going to, it doesn't matter, I'm sure, you may get the support anyway, is that I don't think there is a current management structure for managing the assembly rooms. It was previously under the auspices of Derby Live, but it's been a sort of dead space for 7 years now. So I suppose until we know what the venue, it just seems too speculative as a proposal because we don't know what the venue would be, and there's nothing to go on for them to sort of actually look at a management structure around it. So whilst I'm not against it, I don't think I can vote for this, thank you, Lucy, because I just think it's not relevant at the moment, I would say. Thank you.
Yeah, sadly, I feel the same way, Lucy. I've got to be honest with you. I can't really support it. Before I go to the vote. Okay, have you captured that? Yeah, you've got it down there. Yeah, okay. Those in favour, please show. Those against, please show.
1, 2.
Okay. Lucy, you've got one on schools, is it?
No, it's on children's homes, Chair.
Children's homes, sorry, yeah.
Now, we already have a children's home in the city which is ready to welcome our children, but we cannot get the staffing to support it. So my recommendation to Cabinet is absolutely right that we need to have more places for our children who we haven't got foster carers for. Foster care should be the first thing that we are looking at. Adoption is absolutely vital. Our own children's homes is the way we should be going. But if we can't get the staff, there's no point in having more property. So I was going to say, recommend to Cabinet that work needs to be done not only on the physical infrastructure for children's homes, but also to ensure that we can recruit staff to manage such establishments.
Is that including a possible extension of EU visas? No, that was a joke. So it's all right, okay. Yeah. I'll give you the clue when it's a joke. Okay, right, okay, thank you very much for that. Do you have a seconder for that? Was that, did you? No, you didn't. Sorry, you're just scratching your ear, sorry. Alison.
I would just want to comment on that. Again, it's not a motion a recommendation, that I would be against as such. I just think it's a bit redundant because I think it's extremely, we may have one home where there is problems at the moment in recruiting a manager, but that's partly to do with the fact they had recruited one, another member of staff fell ill, etc. There's kind of reasons why we are where we are, and I believe that the team are doing everything they can to recruit staff. So my message would be that this is extremely important that we have provision in the city for people, children from suitable accommodation for children in care, so they're not sent to Glasgow or Coventry or wherever. So, and I know that the staff are already doing what they can to recruit people. So I'm not against it, Lucy, but I can't vote for it because I just don't think it's particularly relevant. Thank you.
Thank you, Alison. If there's no more comments, we'll go to the vote on that. Sorry, have we got a seconder? No, we haven't. I'm sorry that one falls. Okay. Thank you very much for that. I think we've debated. Thank you, Simon. We're now moving on to item 12, compliance with contract and financial rules. We've dealt with that. So it's item 13, which I think is exclusion of the press and public, isn't it, Stephen? Do you want to read that and then we'll turn off the official coverage?
Thank you, Chair. So it's to consider a resolution to exclude the press and public during consideration of the following items: that under Section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972, the press and public be excluded from the meeting during discussion of the following items on the grounds that they involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 of Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Act, and that the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information.
Is there anybody hiding upstairs? No? In the Minstrels Gallery? No? Okay.